Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Gio, and today I'm going to be predicting the 2020 NHL playoffs.
The truth.
Hey everyone, Gio back again. This is going to be a bit of a different video, but I thought I would do it, just for fun. And pretty much I'm going to be doing a video on my predictions on who I think is going to end up winning in the 2014 playoff bracket this season. Anyways, let's get into it. Okay, so let's just start from left to right. Let's start with the West and then go to the East. Personally, looking at Calgary versus Winnipeg, I don't know about you, but I think, judging on the core that Winnipeg has, and the fact that they also have Connor Hellebuyck, who has been coming off of probably his greatest season of all time, I think I'm going to go with Winnipeg, and I'm going to say out of 5 games, Winnipeg will win in 4. Now moving on, so the next one will be Edmonton versus Chicago, and you think about like Chicago, and they got like Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, they got Corey Crawford, and they've also got like Malcolm Subban because of the trade that they did on the deadline. But personally, I'm gonna say that the Oilers win and go on to the next round. And I think this will be a very, very easy series for the Oilers, considering they just have Leon Draisaitl, who just is being nominated for a Hart Trophy after getting 110 points in 70 games. And then you've got Connor McDavid, and you just got this huge core that they've got going on right now. So personally, I think the Oilers are going to win it in 3. Moving on to the Canucks versus the Minnesota Wild. Okay, personally, I believe that the Minnesota Wild were just running off of a very, very good streak right now, where they had players like Kevin Fiala that were really adding stuff to the team. But at the same time, you've got the Canucks, and Jacob Markstrom is playing out of his mind right now. You got Elias Pettersson that's playing, you got Quinn Hughes who's being nominated for a Calder Trophy. And you've just got all of these players like Bo Horvat and Brock Besser in Vancouver that I think are going to beat the Minnesota Wild in 4 games. Moving on to the Arizona Coyotes versus the Nashville Predators. Okay, call me biased, whatever you want, considering it's my team, but I 100% believe that the Arizona Coyotes are going to be able to take on the Nashville Predators. Now, you'd be saying that's just because I'm a fan of the Coyotes, but if you look at the Coyotes, if our starting goaltender hadn't got injured, we probably would have been up higher in the standings. Like, just think about it. Like, we have Darcy Kemper, who's probably playing the best season he'll ever have in his career. And then we've got Taylor Hall, and we've got Phil Kessel, as well as players like Connor Garland, who is just coming out of a crazy streak that we've never seen him have before, and Clayton Keller. If we are able to lock that down, we could be good. Moving on to the East. Alright, we got Toronto versus Columbus. Okay, so we got 2 teams here, both in the playoffs, and you've got Columbus and you've got Toronto. Now, as much as I hate to say it, I believe that Toronto will end up winning this series in 4 games. Now, as much as I do not like the Toronto Maple Leafs, I believe that with the powers that they have of Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, and they have John Tavares, I believe that they'll be able to take down Columbus, especially after the heavy blows where Columbus lost Sergei Bobrovsky and Artemi Panarin, which were their biggest strengths that were in the playoffs. I do believe that Columbus is going to be able to fight for it, though, because they do have Elvis Merzlikins, and everybody loves an underdog story, but I feel like without all the players that they had, they just won't make it far. Because they lost Artemi Panarin, they lost Sergei Bobrovsky, and they ended up losing Matt Duchene. So, I don't think they're going to make it that far anymore. No offense to Blue Jackets fans, you guys have one of the greatest teams. Love John Tortorella, but I think that Toronto's going to make it farther. Me personally, I'd love to see another story of Columbus, coming back and having another underdog story, but I'm starting to think it's a bit unlikely with all the players that they lost. It just doesn't seem like it would be good for them So yeah, like I said, I think that for sure Toronto's going to end up winning the series, and I'm sure they won't make it that far though. Next up is Montreal versus the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, for me, I think this one's a bit of an easy one, and you never know what could happen in the playoffs. But if you ask me, for sure that's going to end up being Pittsburgh Penguins take out the Montreal Canadiens. I get that the Montreal Canadiens have, you know, they have Shea Weber, they have Carey Price, but at the same time, the Pittsburgh Penguins are coming off of getting still Sidney Crosby. They got their huge core, and you've got their defense, which is also really, really good. And you've got the fact that they just got Tristan Jarry, who is starting to take the starting job away from Matt Murray. It's almost like the same thing that happened to Marc-Andre Fleury. A younger and better player is taking over. So personally, I think that it's going to be Pittsburgh Penguins. Up next, we got the New York Islanders against the Florida Panthers. And for this year, this might be, I think, the last time that the Islanders might be able to make a push, considering the Islanders are kind of struggling at the moment, considering Matthew Barzal is about to come off of his contract, and he may become a free agent, meaning Matthew Barzal, which is a huge part of their team, might end up leaving, and that could cost them. But at the same time, looking at Florida, you've got players like Huberdeau, and you've got players like Yandel that could definitely make a strong push against the Islanders. But personally, I can see the Islanders winning. After they swept the Pittsburgh Penguins last year, I think that the Islanders are going to have a good chance to make it pretty far, especially when they have players like Thomas Greiss and they have Semyon Varlamov on their team. So personally, I think it'll be Islanders in 5 games. Now moving on to Carolina versus New York. Now, New York made a very solid push to make their team a playoff contender last postseason, getting players like Capo Caco with the 2nd overall pick, and also getting Artemi Panarin in free agency after he wanted out of Columbus. And I think that they did a pretty solid job trying to improve their team, considering they also have Igor Shesterkin, who might be one of the best goalies in the league right now. But at the same time, you've got Carolina, who has players like Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, and Peter Mrazek, who's been playing alright. And well, they've been doing a bit of free agency trading, or not free agency trading, deadline trading, and it's made them a bit worse of a team. I still believe that they'll be able to make a solid push, considering they also got players like Vincent Trocheck and Brady Shea. So, if you ask me, I think that the Carolina Hurricanes will win it in 4 games against the New York Rangers. Now going on to the bye teams. For the first round, we'll start off with Winnipeg versus St. Louis. And this was a series that we had last season as well during the playoffs. So, pretty much you got Winnipeg versus St. Louis, and St. Louis is even stronger than before. So this is going to be out of 7 starting for the rest of the rounds, and I think St. Louis will go on to, win it, and I think they'll win in 6 games. Now, Edmonton against Dallas. Edmonton versus Dallas is a series that I don't think we've really seen. Like, the last time that we saw that series was when it was Dallas versus Edmonton, and I don't remember which year, but everybody makes fun of it for the Patrick Stefan missed empty netter. And I think last time that was Dallas that went on to win, and I think that Dallas is a really strong offense, defense, as well as they have Ben Bishop, who could be really solid for them. And pretty much just looking at that sort of playoff lineup right there, I think that even though they have all that, Edmonton will still be able to push through with Draisaitl, McDavid. And even though Koskinen isn't doing the greatest, I think that Draisaitl and McDavid are going to carry their team going on. Now, Vancouver against Colorado. I don't think we've ever really seen this matchup before, but at the same time, just looking at it, I think Colorado will end up winning this. I'm not sure how many games yet, I'll still think about that right now. But you've got Vancouver, who, yes, does have players like Bo Horvat, Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson, and Jacob Markstrom. But then you've got Colorado, who's got players like Philip Grubauer, Mikko Rantanen, Gabriel Landeskog, and you've got players like, you know, like, even Ian Cole hasn't been that bad lately. And I really think that Colorado is going to make a solid push, and they could potentially make it all the way if you ask me. Because Colorado just seems like I forgot to mention Nathan MacKinnon, and Nathan MacKinnon has been a beast so far. So I think Colorado is going to end up winning this in 5 games. Now moving on, Arizona versus Vegas. Now I'm lucky enough to be able to see a few Arizona versus Vegas games. I've seen, I think 2 or 3, and based on that, just as much as I hate to say it, I think Vegas is going to beat Arizona. Yes, we have players like Phil Kessel, Taylor Hall, Clayton Keller, Connor Garland, and we also have Darcy Kemper, but Vegas seems way too strong this season, and I think Vegas is just going to make a huge push. Although, the games I've gone to, it's kind of just split down the middle where Arizona won 1 and Vegas won 1. But I think that Vegas is going to make a very solid push right now as a playoff team and hopefully not have a first round exit just like they did against the Sharks where they choked a 3-1 lead. And with that, let's go over to the East. Okay, so Toronto versus Boston. Okay, come on. We already know what I'm going to say to this one, don't we? This happens every single year, and it's always the exact same result. Toronto versus Boston. Boston wins against Toronto in 7. I don't even need an explanation for that one. Next one. Flyers versus Penguins. Now this is an interesting matchup, because the Penguins sort of are still a strong team, but aren't as good as usual right now, considering a part of their season was where they played without Sidney Crosby, so they weren't doing as well. But then you got the Philadelphia Flyers, and the Philadelphia Flyers were just going on a rampage. Like, if the season kept on going, they for sure would have taken over the Capitals for the top of the Metro. Like, there's no question about that. Just the players that they have right now, and the way that they're working in unison, even with Carter Hart as their starter right now, they're making moves for sure. And I think that the Flyers are going to take out the Penguins in 6 games. Okay. So now you've got the Islanders, and they're going to be going up against the Lightning. Now, although the Lightning choked in the playoffs against the Blue Jackets where they were swept, which was probably the greatest underdog story of all time, I believe that the Lightning aren't going to have another story like that where they go out in that bad of a way. They're playing against the Islanders, and the Islanders have been a really strong team, considering there was that one time when they had like a 7-game winning streak. But at the same time, just Tampa, I think, is an extremely strong team, and if they can have Kucherov and they can have Stamkos and Andrei Vasilevsky playing like usual in the playoffs and not the way that they did last season, they could make a really, really solid push. And moving on, now you have Carolina against the Capitals. We saw this last year, where it was the Capitals against Carolina, and Carolina won in 7, which was another huge underdog story that nobody saw happening. But I don't think that's going to happen again this year. I think that Ovechkin, even though he's got his last couple of years left in him, I think Ovechkin could make a solid push with the team, and you have players like Kuznetsov, Karlsson, who might be the best defenseman of the year, and you've got Holtby, who this may be his last time in the playoffs as a Capital if he doesn't sign somewhere else. And personally, I think that Washington is going to take out Carolina this time in 7 games. Now let's go on to the 3rd round. So with that, you have the winners being St. Louis versus Colorado, and then you have Vegas against, you have Vegas against Dallas. Or no, not Dallas, Vancouver, sorry. And over in the East, you have Boston going up against Philadelphia, and then you have Tampa against Washington. Based on this, let's start on the East, or the West again. So St. Louis versus Colorado. And we all know the story of St. Louis, as they've been on a tear recently after their Stanley Cup win, when nobody expected it to happen, as they were pretty much the worst team in the league. And then you've got Colorado, who's been pretty solid lately, as they were second in the Central for a long time. So pretty much, if it weren't for St. Louis, then Colorado would have taken the division for sure. And this may seem kind of crazy, and I may be crazy for this, but I think Colorado is going to beat St. Louis in the playoffs. Yes, I may sound crazy like I said, but I think that Colorado will win. I do believe it's going to be a very, very tight playoff round, and I think that it'll go to 7. But even if they have Binnington, I just feel like Colorado is just improving more and more every day, and it'll be Colorado who wins it. Next up, you got Vancouver versus Vegas. And Vancouver, like I said, is a very, very strong team. But at the same time, I think that it's just going to end up being Vegas again. Because Vegas is just a very strong team. And while they had their Cinderella story back in their first season, that doesn't just mean that they're going to be great every single season, considering, I mean, like, look at last season, but I think that they really will be a good team this season. Vegas is just, they keep improving. Like, they still have Marchessault, they still have Fleury, and they may have one of the best goaltending situations in the league right now because they have Robin Lehner as a backup when he's starting potential. And they have, like I said, they have Marchessault, they have Fleury, they have Lehner, they have Stone, they have Carlson. And all of those could come very clutch in the playoffs, and I think that they'll take over Vancouver. Alright, so now you got the East, and you've got Boston going against the Flyers. Now, I think that this could be a very, very close season, but with the President's Trophy win for the Boston Bruins, I got Boston going over them. Even though I hate the Bruins, it pains me to say that I think Boston is going to end up winning this. And they're just too strong of a team right now. Like, Pasternak is like a hard candidate. Then you've got Tuukka Rask, who's still playing like a really good goalie right now. You have players like Patrice Bergeron, and I guess you could say Brad Marchand, even though I hate him. Just all of that in unison, I believe that that's going to be able to give them another solid push like last season. And then over here, you've got Tampa versus Washington. And Washington is still looking like a pretty good team, and then you've got Tampa over there. And this is going to be a really hard decision, and this could be a really close sort of playoff, I guess, round. But personally, I'm going to have to go with Tampa. Even though Tampa choked last season, I believe Tampa's going to come out guns blazing and just try to make a really solid playoff push and try to win it all this season. But now, let's go on to conference finals. So in the East, you're going to have Colorado against Vegas, and in the West, you're going to have Tampa versus Boston. And starting with Colorado versus Vegas. Again, Vegas is a really strong team this season, and I think that they really will do well this season. But I gotta give it to Colorado this season. Colorado just is kind of just a tank right now. And then there was also the problem where Vegas was struggling for a bit, and they even dropped down to like a wild card spot at times. And I think Colorado is just going to do better, considering they've just been able to solidify their spot in the playoffs the entire season, while Vegas kind of went up and down in their rosters. Or, yeah, they went up and down on their staff management, considering they had to get a new head coach for some reason. I don't know why they fired him. And then there was where they started to drop down into a wild card spot for a bit. But over in the East, if we have Boston against Tampa Bay, I think we've seen this series a few times, and most of the time it can be shown as Tampa Bay or Boston, so it's kind of a very even matchup. But I think that Boston's going to take it, this time in 5 games. And you may be thinking, 5 games? Why 5 games? I think Boston is just really that good that they could do it in 5 games over Tampa. But now let's go to the finals. So, looking statistically and looking at the players, you have Colorado going against Boston, and that's 2 really, really strong teams that could both make an impact in this playoffs. And I believe that both of them really will. Then you've got Boston, and you've got, you know, you got Boston, you've got all those strong players like I mentioned before, and then you've got Colorado, who's also got like a pretty decent defense considering they even have like Erik Karlsson, or I think that, not Erik Karlsson from the Sharks, but Erik Johnson, who was first overall picked by the Blues. Now in Colorado, you got Nathan MacKinnon, who's also doing very well. You got Landeskog, you got Rantanen, all of them working in unison. And you've even got like Francouz, who's starting to become a pretty solid backup, even though he's like a 63 overall in NHL 20. And you've also got Grubauer, who, even though he's not the greatest goaltender, has been able to really work hard when he has to make it pretty far. And pretty much the only thing stopping the Avalanche from making it to the conference finals last season was the San Jose Sharks, who Father Time finally caught up to them, and they're atrocious now. They didn't even make the playoffs. But looking at both of these teams, I think I'm going to have to give it to Boston. As much as I hate to say it, I think Boston's going to go pretty far. And usually there's the President's Trophy curse, but I think Boston is gonna make it for sure. Because Boston, I'm sorry, but I can't think that they're gonna lose when you have all the assets that they do. Especially since Pasternak had like 47 goals this season. So I think that Boston's gonna win, and they're going to be your 2020 Stanley Cup champions. Anyways, there's my prediction. This is probably the longest video that I've ever recorded before. So hopefully you were able to stick with me the entire time, and hopefully I wasn't too boring. But please consider subscribing, maybe hit that like button, and leave a comment. And if you have any things that you agree or disagree with me on, you can leave it down in the comments, and maybe I'll get back to you. And as always, stay awesome, stay quarantined. See you guys later.